Parents, are you exhausted from the daily mealtime battles with your picky eater? Maybe you've tried everything. You've hidden vegetables in their smoothies, you've tried to negotiate just one more bite, or you've done the sticker charts, and you've done all of the different behavioral modifications, but you're still struggling and you're still frustrated. If you're like most of the parents we talk to, you've read countless articles and you've seen that there's a lot of different approaches here, right? There's a lot of different philosophies of what mealtime and what feeding should look like for your kids. And those things are important. I want you to be intentional about some of the choices and the behaviors you make as a parent. But what if I told you that the root cause, sometimes the underlying issues there, are not just a behavioral thing, but maybe there's a neurological issue that's behind the scenes as well. That is something that most doctors aren't talking about. Most behavioral approaches are missing, is that even if you do it right, even if you do all the things that you're supposed to, your kid might still be struggling. That's what this video is for. I want to provide a different perspective. I want to provide a different framework that might help get to the bottom of your kids' struggles with that. And I can't help but think of one of our recent Thrive kiddos when we're talking about this, a little boy named Maddox, that there's a lot going on when he first reached out. You know, his parents had some concerns with communication, there's some sensory things, some regulation challenges going on, but one of the things that had recently developed was picky eating. It hadn't been an issue before, had recently flared up after some other health challenges he'd had, and all of a sudden he really didn't want to try new things. There was a very small range, right? Certain textures, certain food colors that he would be interested in. And man, after just a handful of weeks of adjustments, they were already noticing that he was exploring more foods. He was voluntarily trying new foods, things that he wasn't doing for that last 6 months as he'd gone through this crisis. So that is what the story could be for you, but we've got to understand why. I mentioned the nervous system, right? The nervous system is really the missing piece in this process. It's usually the piece that's not talked about it, but it can be connected to this in three different ways. So let's talk about the three different ways the nervous system is connected. Number one, it could be due to a sensory overload. What happens in a lot of kids is some sort of neurological dysregulation. That neurological dysregulation most frequently we see show up in the upper neck, and that affects their nervous system in a lot of different ways. And one of them is the sensory system. Their sensory system, instead of taking in normal input, it does take in normal input, but it perceives it as abnormal, right? The textures, the temperatures, the way that the food feels in their mouth, instead of that being a normal sensation, it can be uncomfortable for a kid. It can be something that triggers even pain or some sort of abnormal sensation. So that sensory system can really affect the eating process. That's also something that overwhelming sensory input into the brain usually creates a stress response. That's what turns on what's called the sympathetic nervous system, or maybe you've heard of it as the fight or flight response. The fight or flight response is what kicks into high gear when our nervous system feels like we're running from a bear, right? When there is some sort of stress or survival instinct. That doesn't help either, because that sympathetic dominance, that stress response, makes our brain crave sugars. It craves simple carbs, because if you truly were in a war zone, that's what you would need, right? You would need that quick energy source so that you could get through whatever that immediate challenge is. So the sensory challenge is a huge one for picky eaters. It's often not just a behavioral issue, there's a sensory piece as well. What else can be involved? Number two, the vagus nerve. Vagus nerve dysregulation and dysfunction is a huge piece of this. That connects back to that neurological dysregulation we talked about. More often than not, the most susceptible place for that is the upper neck. This is the area that's most vulnerable during the birth process, right? Any birth trauma, whether that's C-section, forceps, vacuum extraction, hands-on, just the doctors pulling, guiding that baby out, induction, in utero constraint, so many things in that pregnancy and birth journey can affect how that structural system in a kid is functioning, whether that's as a baby or as they grow up into those toddler and school age years. Vagus nerve comes out of the base of your skull and it runs by those first couple cervical vertebrae. So when you have that misalignment and fixation in that upper region, it's going to affect how the vagus nerve functions. What does the vagus nerve do? It is all of the calming, digestion, immune system functioning in your body. So the opposite, the counterbalance to that stress response that we just talked about, that's the vagus nerve. So when that is off, when we have that higher sensory input triggering stress, and we have the vagus nerve that's not there to calm it down and to bring it back down, that's where the imbalance takes place. And then that is going to lead to gut issues for kids. Because the vagus nerve mediates digestion, when that's not doing its job, we're going to have gut irritation, we're going to have belly discomfort, gas pain and bloating, things that make the eating experience unpleasant for kids. So now they associate eating with pain, with discomfort, and so we don't want anything to do with that. So we got sensory overload, we got the vagus nerve, and the other piece of this can be the oromotor system. Upper neck cranial subluxations, that can affect how our body, how our jaw and our mouth is moving. So the chewing, the swallowing process, it's pretty complex, right? Your mouth, your tongue has to move in a very coordinated manner. And when the nerves that are controlling those functions aren't functioning properly, when they have some sort of dysregulation, we're not able to do that properly. This is where sometimes the orofacial myofunctional side of things can be really helpful too, right? We've got a few recommended resources in the area that we love patients working with because they can help work on strengthening that posture. It's usually going to be associated with mouth breathing instead of nasal breathing, maybe snoring and some other airway related issues as well. All can be wrapped in to the sensory and the texture thing. So huge piece of it can be involved with that. The bottom line here is that those different neurological concepts and those different neurological aspects of regulation are a big piece of the story. It's not just a behavior thing. It's not just them choosing to not want to do it. I get it, parents. There's times, and we're there with you, right? We've got 4 kids from 8 down to 15 months. There are times you've got to encourage your kids. You've got to go at it with the right mentality and the right mindset and encourage them to be brave and to make new choices. But don't think that it's just a voluntary thing. Don't think that it's just a behavioral control issue. There's very frequently other things going on as well. So I hope that helps. I hope that story, that Maddox's story there, can inspire you that there can be a big difference for your kid as well. You don't have to just keep banging the drum of behavior charts and trying to, kind of give this tug of war with your kids where it's almost a negotiation to get them to do what they're supposed to do. Maybe there's something else that's missing, and maybe that can be part of the story of getting your kid the relief, getting your kid the help that they need. Please reach out to our team if you have questions on that. Step 1 is just doing our scans, doing that neurological assessment so we can see what's going on in their nervous system. Do they have that sensory overload? Do they have some sort of gas versus brake stress response off? So that then we can know, okay, this is what they're dealing with, and this is what the game plan is going to look like to get them heading in a better direction. Our team is happy to walk you through all that and get that set up, and we are here to help your family thrive.